All gas, no brakes is back for the San Francisco 49ers in 2025. Robert Saleh getting all kinds of reinforcements on the defensive side of the ball. Got a draft expert, Joe Marino, from the Locked On Podcast Network to join me to break down the San Francisco 49ers draft on today's Locked On 49ers.
You are Locked On 49ers, your daily San Francisco 49ers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On 49ers. Brian Peacock here with you. Got a couple of special guests. No Croc today, but it is a Winky Wednesday. Second half of the show, my former radio colleague and weekly guest, Nick Winkler, joining us to talk Niners, talk draft, talk about maybe some shade being thrown at Brock Purdy by an ex-49ers teammate. And first, we're going to start with Joe Marino, though, and break down the 49ers draft from one of the best evaluators here on the Locked On Podcast Network, Locked On NFL Scouting's Joe Marino. He is also the host of Locked On Bills, and the Bills might have thwarted one attempt or maybe multiple attempts to draft a defensive tackle during the draft. So we'll talk a little bit about that draft strategy and what the 49ers ended up getting in their haul. Joe Marino, a big fan of what the Niners are doing there, getting some more beef up front for Robert Saleh's defense. I do want to thank everybody for making this your first listen here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Love our everydayers. Appreciate you stopping by. Hit the thumbs up and subscribe on YouTube and everywhere you get your podcasts. Excited to be talking with Joe Marino, the host of Locked On NFL Scouting and the host of Locked On Bills. One of the other hosts double dipping here on the Locked On Podcast Network, like myself. So I always appreciate, Joe, your evaluations. I trust you as an evaluator. I think you and Kyle do a phenomenal job. And I wanted to get your opinion on the 49ers draft because I did catch an episode of Locked On NFL Scouting, and you had some high praise for the 49ers draft picks. And some analysts, like that used to work on the network, like Trevor Sikkema, giving the Niners a D- on their draft grades.
Come on, Trevor. What's up with that?
Just killing the Niners. They were off the board. Like they were off by like 100 picks on a lot of his evaluations on players. So it was a reachy draft according to him. But I want to hear what you think about it. And also before we get into just the individual selections the Niners made and your evaluations of those guys, I want to talk about your Buffalo Bills that I think potentially sniped the Niners once, maybe even twice. So the Bills also double dipped at defensive tackle. And both times they drafted a defensive tackle was a couple picks right in front of the San Francisco 49ers. And they traded up in front of the Niners both times. Do you think the Bills were implicitly trying to get in front of the San Francisco 49ers when they took TJ Sanders in round 2 at pick 41 and then Deion Walker right in round 4, I think 3 or 4 selections in front of the Niners?
Well, BP, I never thought about that as a reason why the Bills traded up twice for defensive tackles until you sent it to me in a message. And I'm like, oh, yeah, that is true. And then I said it to another Bills person. Did you realize that they traded up twice in front of the Niners for D tackles and then the Niners picked D tackles? And he also was like, no, I didn't realize that. So it is interesting that you point that out because you can certainly connect the dots here and feel like not only did they, of course, both go D tackle, but stylistically similar to how they want to play defense. And so you could see how that would be the case. Now, I will counter with this. The Bills traded up for TJ Sanders and then San Francisco drafts Alfred Collins. Couldn't think of a more different couple of defensive linemen than Collins and Sanders. And then I'd even say the same thing about in the 4th round when the Bills moved up for Deion Walker out of Kentucky. San Fran picked CJ West. Again, completely stylistic different players. And so I would be a little surprised if San Francisco got sniped and they went so different, in terms of the skill set that they ultimately got. So I probably, but where I get thrown off a little bit on that idea is just how different the players San Francisco ultimately drafted. And you think about what they already had in Jordan Elliott and Kevin Givens is, up the field penetration style players. Maybe they wanted those more A-gap defender, nose tackle types to supplement the defensive line.
Absolutely. And I was a big fan of TJ West. He was my favorite of I'm combining guys now. TJ Sanders, he was my favorite of the 4, but I think Deion Walker was my least favorite of the 4. So I think the 49ers got my middle 2 grades. And I kind of liked Alfred Collins is a little more of a 3rd round grade, but I had West was the 3rd round grade for me as well. So a little too high on Collins, in my opinion. But steal potentially in CJ West. How do they pair together for you? And what was your evaluation of those 2 defensive tackles that the Niners ended up with?
I really like Alfred Collins. I think it's appropriate value where they got him in the second round. Obviously, you're not drafting him for pass rush. That's not going to be big on the menu, but what he does defending the run and owning his space is really strong. He could take on doubles. He's going to allow the second level to play downhill and be clean. And, he plays the hot motor. He's not just like a big sloppy dude that can't run. Like he can move, and he's a guy that plays with a lot of urgency. And so I think for San Francisco, I like him. I like him a lot. I think if you wanted that style of player, then he's a strong candidate. You're not drafting him for pass rush. I think you have to acknowledge that. And I think that's why he wasn't a guy that went in the first round. But for that true space-eating nose tackle with movement skills, I think he's a solid pick. And honestly, if that was the direction the Bills went, I think I'd be pretty satisfied with it.
Do you see him playing next to CJ West? Are they rotational guys? Are they 3-down players?
No, I don't think so. I look at both of them as really dynamic run stuffers, and CJ West, a really different body type, more of a dense build, but that dude owns his space as well. Very different, plays with a lot of leverage, gets under pads, and is able to reset and play with extension, despite not being a overly huge player, just very, very firm. He's like a ball of muscle. So they accomplish the same thing in very, very different ways. And so I think you have to look at them less as players that are going to be on the field together and more as guys that are going to complement some of the other players that are already in the mix in San Francisco that are more of your penetration style up the field type players. So in short yardage, yeah, you'd love to have those guys next to each other. But I think long and late downs and on most downs, passing downs, you're not going to want to have those guys together on the field.
Yeah, West is such a leverage monster. Really worked out fantastic as well. And so, maybe there's a little bit more upfield ability with him potentially in the NFL with some of that athleticism, the way he gets off the ball, and love him taking on double teams. I mean, I was just really a fan of the way he played. Now that you got to get some pass rush from somewhere, whether it's rotational guys, whether it's their first round pick. And clearly Robert Saleh came in and is like, this is not going to cut it, guys. They went 5 straight defensive picks to start the draft. I'm interested with your thoughts on the 2 third-round selections, if those were reaches for you like they were for Trevor Sikkema in Nick Martin, the linebacker, and Upton Stout, the nickel guy. But we got to talk about the first-rounder. Could he be that guy that develops a pass rush? 5 sacks last year for Mykel Williams. Obviously, he's an elite run defender. Where do you see him impacting the passing game in the NFL? Do you think there's more potential there for him to do it?
He's got every tool in the bag to become a really good pass rusher in the NFL. He's very young, right? Isn't he a guy that turns like 21 in June, if I'm not mistaken? So very young, and he's got all the tools, right? And that's what you're drafting. You're drafting upside. And with Williams, you get size, you get length, you get burst and bend, you get power rush. So I love that he's got everything on the menu. And from here, it's just about developing his skill set. And I thought you saw good player development from Coach Saleh with the Jets, and how he was able to develop a lot of those young defensive linemen, particularly on the edge. And I think Mykel Williams has a really exciting skill set, maybe not all that dissimilar to what the Jets had in Jermaine Johnson, and how you saw really good progression there before he got injured last season. But I think it's all about the tools there. And you're talking about an early pick, 11th overall. You want to make sure that you get a guy that can do everything for your defense and, isn't a finished product. I like that about him. I like that there's ceiling for him to develop into. And, I think the Niners have been looking for that running mate for a while for Bosa, whether it's been Leonard Floyd or Drake Jackson or Yetur Gross-Matos, some investments that I didn't love. I'm a lot higher on this and the potential than I have been on a lot of the other plans San Francisco's had at that position opposite of Bosa.
Yeah, Mykel Williams, just a pup, 20 years old, but a ridiculous amount of natural strength. And I love the story post-draft that I heard of him saying that he was a wrestler in high school, went to states in the 280-pound class. I was like, 280. But he was wrestling at only 250 pounds, but in the 280 class. It's like, dude, this dude's natural strength is crazy. And you see him holding up at only 260 pounds in the interior on that Georgia defensive line. So phenomenal stuff, all the length. He's got some burst to close too on the quarterbacks. I think there is a lot more there as a pass rusher that we just haven't seen yet with him. What are your thoughts on Nick Martin, a 220-pound linebacker in round 3? A little high based on some draft boards, but the dude can flat out go get ball carriers.
Yeah, I mean, this wasn't a good linebacker class. I don't think you'll find anybody that was in love with it. So I think if you had guys you liked, get your guys. And I'll go back to Robert Saleh and get a first-row seat of watching him with the Jets and seeing the development of 2 players in particular, Quincy Williams and Jamian Sherwood. Those guys have become really freaking good players for the Jets that are both profiles as smaller linebackers. And even Jamian Sherwood's a transition as a safety at Auburn. And that guy is terrific. He got paid this offseason, and maybe there's some sticker shock if you've not been following the Jets, but that guy was phenomenal in terms of development. And this style of backer, again, very similar to what I've watched the Bills deal with, and Terrell Bernard, who's 225 pounds if he's soaking wet, and Matt Milano, those types of players. And I think Nick Martin has that type of profile. And so I think that makes the picks of Collins and West more logical, where if you're going to get a little bit smaller on the second level, got to cover him up, got to allow him to run and be free and be that pursuit style player, the matchup player, the space player that he's been brought in to be. And you need to have guys up front that can allow him to run sideline to sideline. And so is it a little early? Sure. But I would cling to the linebacker class not being very stellar and needing to get an answer. And then, of course, what Coach Saleh has done with this body type.
More with Joe Marino, the later picks from the San Francisco 49ers, and Winky Wednesday as well next. This episode of Locked On 49ers brought to you by Skylight Calendars. And Skylight, you can say goodbye to sticky notes, scribbled plans on the fridge, and overlapping calendar invites. The Skylight Calendar is here to bring clarity to the chaos and help families stay organized without the stress. This sleek digital display syncs with your existing calendars, Google, Apple, Outlook, and more, making it simple to track appointments, practices, dinners, and reminders all in one easy-to-see place. And to be honest with you, it is a must if you're a busy family and you got a lot going on and kids and going to shuttling off to practice and school and recitals, whatever else there is. And sometimes there can be so much confusion. Sometimes I don't even know where my calendar stuff is set, and I'll get a notification here. I'll get a different notification over here. Bring it all in one place, make it easy, and make it so everyone can see. No confusion with the fam. Skylight Calendar. You've heard about the Skylight frames. This is the Skylight Calendar, and right now Skylight is offering our listeners $30 off their 15-inch calendars by going to skylightcal.com/NFL. Go to skylightcal.com/NFL for $30 off your 15-inch calendar. That's Skylight, SKYLIGHT, Cal, CAL.com/NFL. Any thoughts on the rest of the Niners draft? Upton Stout, the nickel out of Western Kentucky. Love the way he plays. 5'8", 180 pounds, obviously, so not the biggest guy in the world. Late in round 3. Jordan Watkins, wide receiver out of Ole Miss. Jordan James, running back. Marquez Siegel. And CJ West's teammate, Curtis Rourke. Any names stand out to you there in at the end of the 49ers draft?
I really like Jordan Watkins, this receiver out of Ole Miss. I'll give you a take. I like him better than Trey Harris. His running mate at Ole Miss. Come on now, the tape's better. The tape's better with Jordan Watkins. Just watch it. Watch this guy play against Arkansas and Duke, man. They didn't have a prayer. They didn't have a prayer for dealing with this guy. He's got vertical speed down the field, ball skills, and there's more to it than just a guy that can run fast in a straight line. I think there's a route running profile that can be tapped into. I mean, you look at this lane kick offense at Ole Miss. I mean, it's so Mickey Mouse, man. They're not really given a chance to do a lot of things in terms of versatility with alignment, running a full route tree, being able to go in motion, a lot of static nature. That's not going to be Kyle Shanahan in this offense. I think there's so much untapped potential with him as a route runner, as a vertical player, as a yards after catch guy. One of my favorite sleepers at the wide receiver position. I couldn't believe that Trey Harris got all the attention there at Ole Miss when I thought the skill set that's way more attractive at the next level is Jordan Watkins. So that was one of my favorite picks that I don't think is getting enough love. Even Jordan James out of Oregon, I don't think he has a superpower. He's a little bit smaller and plays a really physical style and doesn't have a ton of athleticism, but I think he's a really clean projection to this Shanahan run scheme. And I think that's probably a position that maybe overlooked in terms of needing to solidify some of that depth at the running back position. So I mostly come away excited about this draft. I love the swings for the defensive line. I'm a big trench guy, especially on defense. And, I think it kind of got old seeing the 49ers not be able to get that mix together. I think they're positioned very, very well. I like the ancillary pieces that they're able to pick up for this defense and how they all fit based on the vision that you see coming together with Coach Saleh. I like the couple of skill players that I just talked about in Jordan James and Jordan Watkins. The only thing I really come away with from this draft that I have a question about is, did we get an answer for this interior offensive line? And I feel like there's so many upgradable spots at center and left guard where I think they should have participated in some of the options that were there. And that would be my only question. But I've had that question for a number of years with the 49ers, where it's even a guy like Colton McKivitch at right tackle feels super upgradable, but continues to just start game after game after game. And so I think there's a lot of confidence in that Shanahan style that, the skill players can help make up for maybe some deficiencies up front, and, how they put stress on defenses in different types of ways. But that would be the one thing that I would say, hey, maybe a little bit more help for this offensive line. But I really come away mostly satisfied with how this team improved, obviously on the defensive side of the football, with a couple of X factors when it comes to the offensive skill positions.
Man, you're preaching to the choir with the offensive line with a lot of my listeners here. And we talked about it. And the 49ers just, they can't find offensive tackles that they like. And you're never going to get a bargain really on the offensive line period anymore, but especially at offensive tackle. You're going to have to draft them high. And the 49ers just prefer not to. And so they never find a guy they want to draft. They could be looking for 2 new tackles next year with the retirement potentially of a Hall of Famer on the left side. Current needs inside, and they just don't do it. And I don't know if you heard the clip from 49ers offensive line coach Chris Furster from last year's draft, because there was the same questions last year. Mm-hmm. And he's like, you know what? That's what we do. I would spend draft picks on and pay the guys that score touchdowns and handle the ball too. And so it's like they put a lot on Chris Furster's plate, and they're like, all right, man, we're gonna get some tough guys in here, and they're not going to be early picks aside from Trent Williams, and you're going to have to coach them up. And that's just the strategy. And they might have to force some offensive linemen next year, depending on how things go, but they're okay with their current group. And they didn't add anything but Connor Colby in the 7th round to that group.
It's been interesting to see the contrasting offensive line philosophies between Kyle Shanahan and Sean McVay, which I'm sure you've probably gotten into, where the 49ers, and even I'll extend this to the Dolphins a little bit too, where they've kind of skated by with offensive line. And I think you've seen McVay, obviously they've shifted, dude. They're paying guards big money, right? Mm-hmm. Tons of them, right? It's crazy to see the shift there. And, I think that's helped their progression as a football team. And even with the Dolphins and Mike McDaniel, they try to skirt by with offensive line. And I think you saw them say, you know what, enough is enough. And they went out and they, sign a James Daniels, and they move up. They trade significant capital to get Jonas Savianaya out of Arizona, who I think is a wonderful fit. And, they got ahead of the Teron Armstead thing with the drafting of Patrick Paul, who's going to succeed him at left tackle. And they find their center in Aaron Brewer in free agency. And that seems like a good fit. And you saw maybe some shifting there. It's like, come on, Kyle, let's get up to speed with this, because I think, yeah, you want to pay the guys that score touchdowns, but you know what allows them to score more touchdowns? Well, if you can block. And so I'd love to see the ceiling of this offensive line be elevated. Obviously, Dom Puni, what a pick that was last year. Let's keep taking some swings and see if we can get some talent here to help our skill players be even better.
Yeah, you can't get lucky if you don't take any swings. And so
right.
We might see a draft next year, which was the opposite version of this year, where they just go O-line to start the 2026 class. So we'll see. We're getting ahead of ourselves. We still got to worry about 2025. You should listen to Joe Marino in 2025. They're breaking down everything in the NFL on Locked On NFL Scouting. You can hear some more takes on the Niners draft and all the other drafts around the league. They do phenomenal stuff. That is a must listen for anybody who's interested in team building in the NFL draft. And of course, Joe's also doing Locked On Bills daily right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Follow him at the Joe Marino. Joe, appreciate it. Always fun chatting with you, man.
Thanks for having me on, BP. Really appreciate it.
And that brings us to the Winky Wednesday portion of this show. And let's officially bring on today's second guest.
Nick Winkler, come on down.
Got kind of pumped there talking in the first half of this podcast, Wink, with my guy Joe Marino. And he loves himself some big people, just like Robert Saleh does. And it's just like the all gas, no brakes, right? It's back in that vibe. And when you think about, okay, so you draft a 220-pound linebacker, right? You want to keep Fred Warner clean. And so how do you do that? Well, you draft the best edge-setting defensive end in the draft in Mykel Williams. You draft a 6'6", 330-pound behemoth for the middle of your defense in round 2. You follow that up with another nose tackle type in CJ West, who is just stout and a leverage monster, and eat up some blocks so those guys can fly to the football. Like, it gets me excited. All gas, no brakes. It's back.
Yeah, I mean, it's why I gave the draft an A-, is I really love what the 49ers did. They know what happened last year. They know they were a 6-win team, and the defense really let them down, especially that front four. They just weren't getting any pressure on quarterbacks. It was time and time again just getting picked apart. And so what do? You bring in a bunch of young guys, just guys that are hungry, guys that are ready for it. Yeah, obviously you bring in Robert Saleh, who has led your team to some great places in the past. So you bring him back. And you say, what do you want in the draft? You want these guys? We'll go get them for you. And also, not just up front. I mean, I love what they did. I love all three of those guys. Fantastic. I'm also, the more I'm watching Nick Martin, the more I'm liking his nose for the ball. Like, I don't want to say he reminds me of Fred Warner, but he has that kind of like just go get it attitude, which paired with Warner, that could be something special. So I really like what the 49ers have done. 49er fans out there should be really excited for what this defense is going to bring.
I mean, Nick Martin flies to the football, and that's why I mocked him to the 49ers, because I just thought it was a perfect fit. He's got 4.5 speed. You see it on the field. He triggers and he goes and gets it. Now, he's got athleticism. That doesn't mean you're automatically great in coverage. So that's kind of where it's like, okay, so good. Now we get to 3rd and 8. And then that's kind of where I had the question. But I love the idea of just the physicality and the size and the athleticism the 49ers might be bringing on the early downs against teams to give themselves an opportunity to rush the passer and defend the pass.
Yeah, I mean, the last 7, 8, 9 years as a 49er fan, we've come to expect that, right? They're that defense that goes and smacks you in the mouth, makes you feel they're present, so that later in this game, you're not going to run across over the middle, because Fred Warner just put a big hit on you last time you tried to do it, right? Or Nick Bosa is going to get that sack, or whoever's playing opposite Nick Bosa, who again hopefully is Williams, is getting that pressure and making the quarterback step up, and maybe one of these big guys is making a big play, because we're going to learn more obviously as they start doing rookie mini camps, and then when OTAs come around again, it's going to be like, okay, now we're going to see what they're doing on 3rd downs, right? You're going to kind of get a picture, like, has D Winters taken a step forward? Is he going to be like, actually, Martin, why don't you just learn behind me for a year? I'm going to hold this thing down. And I mean, I'd be very much okay with that. I would be okay with any of these guys getting beat out, except for probably Williams and Collins.
I want to talk about some veteran players on the 49ers. We haven't had a chance, Wink, to talk about the Kittle extension. I know there's a quote you want to bring up that George Kittle brought up, and the good vibes that are happening right now as we start to get ready for 2025. And a little Brock Purdy note as well next. This episode of Locked On 49ers is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. NBA playoffs are in full swing, and every night delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments. Whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout player, there's never been a better time to get in on the action than right now with FanDuel. Dubs advancing to the second round of the playoffs, and you can play right along with them, right? FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before tip-off and live during the games. With player props, performance trends, same-game parlays, fans have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. And how could $200 in bonus bets help add excitement to it for you if you win your first $5 bet? So you just got to hit that first $5 bet. And if you're new to FanDuel, it's the perfect time to sign up. Head to FanDuel.com, place your first $5 bet. If it wins, you'll get $200 in bonus bets. So download the app or go to FanDuel.com. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. Drop that Kittle quote, because I hadn't seen it until you brought it up before we started recording, Wink. And I want to get your thoughts on the new extension. George Kittle staying around, and hopefully that means he's a career 49.
This is via Jennifer Lee Chan, NBC Sports 49ers. She said, or Kittle says, I'm happy we don't have a bunch of guys holding out for contracts. I'm glad that we're not having a super drama-filled offseason. I think every year in my career, we've had a quarterback controversy at some point, and to not have that, it's going great. So there's more to this quote too, but I felt that was, he could have been the distraction, right? He could have been the guy holding out. He could have. The reason he didn't show up to that first day of voluntary camp, it was kind of like, what's going on here? And then to say, like, there's always a quarterback controversy, it's like, that's not settled yet, George. That's still out there.
It's not too late for Brock Purdy to say, I don't like how these negotiations are going. And, oh, is that mandatory minicamp? Guess what? It's not for me because I'm not showing up. So that could still happen. So just, like, don't jinx it, George. But yeah, it's like kind of like a little shade to the, there's Christian McCaffrey. There was Trent Williams last year and obviously Brandon Ayuk. And it's also a little jab at Purdy. Say, hey, don't screw this up, Brock.
And maybe
we're going to go try to win. So I love that from George Kittle. He's he's sending a message.
Yeah, I mean, that's what leaders do on football teams, right? And he's clearly a leader in that locker room. He's been there, I think, since day one. I mean, he's one of those guys that showed up and was immediately talking and telling guys and boosting guys up. And he's that guy. That's why we love George Kittle. And maybe he knows something we don't. Maybe him and Brock have talked about it, and Brock's like, this is going to be fine. I'm not going to hold out. I'm going to be ready. I think the 49ers will take care of me, this and that. And so George is like, well, I'll just take that as gospel. We can move forward. There will not be any quarterback holdout or any controversy like that going into the season. I mean, we can hope, right? I really hope George is right about this one.
Are you surprised the 49ers turned down the reported second-round trade offer for George Kittle and instead decided to sign him? Because they're a team that's been trying to get out from under some money recently. This offseason's kind of been what it's all about, and they decided to say no, and I guess kind of a statement from the 49ers in that way.
Yeah, I'm not surprised because I think there would have been a fan uprising if they had traded away George Kittle, because he's just the best, right? I mean, he's just that guy everybody wants on their football team. Everybody wants to be friends with this guy. Everybody wants to, you put a mic in front of George Kittle's mouth and he starts talking, you turn the volume up. He's that guy that goes out there and backs it up on the field too. So I would have been shocked had the 49ers traded away George Kittle. Like you said, I would have got it. Like, it would have made sense financially, but just to the heart and soul of this franchise, that would have been a huge blow that I'm sure they would have lost some fans over that one.
Do you see this quote about Brock, or it's not about Brock Purdy, but that's where everyone goes with this quote from Talanoa Hufanga and why he signed with the Denver Broncos? This is interesting. Ooh. It's kind of a Rorschach test in a lot of ways.
Let's hear it.
I've had some listeners ask me about it, so I wanted to run this by you, as you are the voice of the fan, as you have been anointed here. So whatever you say goes here for all fans. And that's
what I love. I love that. That's why I come here, so that I could talk for everyone.
This is from Talanoa Hufanga, an interview why he signed with the Denver Broncos, and he's kind of speaking about Dre Greenlaw as well. Quote, even talking to Dre, Hufanga says, he was my locker partner at the Niners, and then we came here together. We were like, man, when you got a quarterback that can go out there and really play as a defense, it's not just 3 and out. There are a lot of teams like that in the NFL. So for us, it's like, we got potential here. Why can't we come over here and help change? He's the reason, talking about Bo Nix and why Huff and Greenlaw decided to sign with the Broncos. A lot of people heard that quote and thought that was shade being thrown toward Brock Purdy, as if he's one of the ones that is not the good quarterbacks, and that they left there to go to a better quarterback in Bo Nix and the Broncos.
I'm going to quote myself here and say, I don't buy it, because I mean, really, like, look at the numbers. Brock Purdy is a stud. There's no way he's talking about Brock Purdy. I mean, maybe they thought about going somewhere else, right? Some other teams maybe were kind of courting them or him personally. And he's like, wait, I don't want to go play for the Jets. Like, I don't want to go play for the Giants. Right. They don't have a quarterback. And Bo Nix showed last year that he's a good quarterback. He is fun to watch. I had a lot of guys on that, probably too many Broncos on my fantasy football team, which is why I didn't win last year.
Yeah, not good.
So no, it wasn't great. But that's why I watched a lot of Broncos football because of it. And he's a good quarterback. So you can understand him kind of getting in there and talking and up his guy. But I don't think that was any shade of Brock Purdy, because if it was ignorant. Like, go read some stats about Brock Purdy.
Well, no, and I agree with you. I think what he was saying is, I want to go to a place that has a good quarterback like what we just had, and we want to continue to win. That's why we didn't choose these other teams that might have been offering us deals, chose the Broncos because they have that. I think he was saying the Niners also had that. And so
completely agree.
When you take it out of context, you look at the quote, I can see how some people might read it wrong. I don't think that's at all what Hufanga was saying. And I'd be shocked if that's what he meant by it.
I mean, people could cut that up and make it clickbait too, right? And just be like, oh, Hufanga talking trash about Purdy, click here, and then you read it and you're like, you could take it that way, but I wouldn't.
The Greenlaw hurt already too. Like, I know it was tough losing Greenlaw, but he's it wasn't smart money either. And when you look at the 49ers replacing some of their defensive linemen and guys they let go in the draft too, it's, first of all, they could be better. Upside, I think they got guys potentially to have a better defensive line. Again, they're rookies, and so we can't expect too much from the rookie class. But not easy to replace Greenlaw, but I don't think it was smart money. I don't think it was devastating to lose, an older, aging Floyd off the edge, or Collins and Hargrave really was never that guy that they signed him to be on the inside. And so I don't think those losses were that big. It was just, Charvarius Ward's going to be tough. They got a nickel in Stout. You keep Bernardo Green and Dominic Lauren on the outside. You can see the vision. A lot still has to go right, and you still have to develop the young guys and all that. But with how many losses the 49ers had in the offseason, I think post-draft, you start to look at it, and you can see how things could still go wrong and a lot of holes to fill. But overall, I think they did as well as they could have to replace just the number of players lost with some highly talented draft picks.
Yeah, I mean, the 49ers have tried, right? It's not for lack of trying to bring in defensive line guys. I mean, they drafted Kinlaw. He didn't work out. They spent a bunch of money on Javon Hargrave. He didn't work out. So, you just hope that at least one or two of these guys that they drafted right now hits. And maybe he's not a superstar, but he's an every down player, or he's a rotational player that actually makes an impact when he's out there. Even if he's not making an impact, you talked about Collins or West, kind of just maybe eating up the middle of that line. If you could do that, that's going to make things a whole lot easier for Nick Bosa, right? And if Drake Jackson comes back, it's going to make things a lot easier for Drake Jackson. And if Williams is out there, it's going to make things easier for everyone around him. So I like what the 49ers did. And all of these draft picks, great. But again, I still think the best thing the 49ers did for their defense this offseason was bringing back Robert Saleh, period.
All gas, no breaks. That's how we start the pod. That's how we're going to end it. That is the theme for this 49ers season now. Robert Saleh is back, and just take the brake pedal out of the car. No brake lights, nothing for the 49ers once again here. No brake lights for Nicholas Winkler. Always a pleasure chatting with you, Wink. Thanks for joining us here on a little shortened edition of the Winky Wednesday. Thanks to all the listeners out there. Make sure you subscribed up on YouTube and everywhere you get your podcasts. And Croc and I back tomorrow. We're going to talk more about that beef and get into our deep dives on some 49ers recent draft picks. None other than second-round defensive tackle Alfred Collins, fourth-round defensive tackle CJ West. Talk to you then right here. Locked On 49ers.
See you.
I don't buy it.
I don't.